We'll start this edition of the show with the U.S. men's national team January camp roster, which of course dropped late last week. There are no European-based players. This is, as you know, not a FIFA date. All 25 players listed then are from Major League Soccer. 17 of them are uncapped. 13 are Olympic eligible. The most experienced player on the roster, Miles Robinson, with 27 caps. It is worth noting, U.S. staff wanted to call in both Griffin Yao, who plays in Belgium, and Rokas Bukstas, who plays in Croatia, but both requests were denied by the respective clubs. Here's U.S. manager Greg Berhalter with more on his January roster.
Yeah, I think there has been a change. I'm trying to pinpoint exactly what it is compared to the first January camp in 2019 to now being 2024. But one thing I'll say is we're grateful for the support of Major League Soccer. This would never happen without them. We're grateful for the support of the clubs who are releasing their players. And, it really is an opportunity, for, young players, MLS-based players to make their mark on this program. And it's always been like that. So that hasn't changed. Michael's mentioned that 9 of the players in the 2002 World Cup made their first appearance in a January camp. So, that's always been the case. And now, I would say we're skewing slightly younger, and it's still the same opportunity, though. And, again, I talked to the players about, setting objectives for themselves coming into this camp. What do they want to achieve here? Because, I don't want them just happy to be involved in this January camp. I want them really striving for goals. Do they want to make their debut in this camp? Do they want to push to be on Nations League roster, Copa America roster, Olympic roster? There's a lot of different opportunities for them in this camp, and I really want them focused on taking advantage of it.
All right, for more on the U.S. national team in this January camp, thrilled to welcome into the show Kasey Keller. Herc, it's always great to have Kasey with us, especially when he's playing through pain. Kasey, for those on the podcast that can't see, looks like you got roughed up a little bit. What happened? You okay?
I'm at my house in Idaho and went snowboarding today and decided to slide down part of the mountain on my face. Opening day for me, it's been a rough winter for the West. The snow hasn't quite come. There's a big storm coming now, so we thought we'd have some time to come out. And I caught something today in the thin conditions, and my face paid the price. So
like a good goalkeeper's always catching something.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you make a save with your face. Sometimes you slide down a mountain with your face. Same but different. Yep.
Who knew we'd get so much weather talk here on Futbol Americas? Kasey, I thought maybe you got in a fight with somebody when they even suggested that you at one point in your illustrious career had been called into a January camp. I know that you were never called into January camp. I wonder, back in your day, Kasey, what did you make of January camp? What do you make of it now? And what value does it have in this, which we will acknowledge is an Olympic year as well?
Yeah, look, I understood it a little bit more back in the day when MLS had almost like a 4-month break, and there was a lot more players on the national team playing in MLS, and so I understood that a little bit. I think now, and I think really over the last 10 years. It's almost been almost a disservice to actually call it a national team camp, because it's really not the national team. I mean, it's an opportunity for some players to get in front of the national team coach. It's just like a training camp for younger fringe players who might someday come into the national team camp. So I don't really take a lot of merit into it. I think I know multiple coaches at different times have tried to get rid of the national team camp. But I know there is some TV contract stipulations where they need to have a couple games to call it a national team game. So, but to me, it's not a national team camp. It's just a squad get together before an MLS season.
Case, I couldn't have said it better myself. You're 100% correct. It's a disservice to the U.S. men's national team. It cheapens what wearing the crest is about. Now, I understand, in theory, what Greg Berhalter or whoever the coach may be wants to get out of it. It's a situation where you can evaluate new talent. There are situations, Kasey, and you know this. It's one thing to see a player on TV or go to the game and see him in his club situation in a game with his friends where he's comfortable. It's another thing to bring him in. See the training habits, see how he interacts with teammates, see what he's about, pull back the curtain. That's something that's of value to a coach. But if we're thinking about this realistically, there's a reason that this camp has trended so young. These fringe players, especially with the trend nowadays with the U.S. men's national team, where last call-up, if I'm not mistaken, there was one Major League Soccer player where the majority of players are in Europe. You can't call this an actual U.S. men's national team camp. Now, that doesn't mean you can't find talent. We heard Greg Berhalter mentioning that the communications official, Mike Cameron, mentioned that in 2002, 9 players debuted in that January camp. That's a different time. That's a lot different than what we have going on today in this program. You can find Jimmy Conrad's, Eddie Johnson's, Landon Donovan's, etc. back then. Today, it may be a bit more difficult. Doesn't mean it can't happen. There are a few names on this list that maybe are interesting to Greg Berhalter and could do something down the road, which case leads me to my question. Who on this list interests you? Is there anybody that kind of catches your eye?
Not yet. And I think that's the big issue. I mean, it's a lot of young players who've been brought in. I mean, look, I think we're looking at something. Let's just take a Kate Cowell, for example. I mean, he's kind of been on the radar for a little bit, but needs to make that next jump up in his ability to see if he's going to be a legit national team player. Now, to get 4 or 5 caps over a 3-4 year period, all January camp games, to me, it doesn't make sense. I mean, so, okay, to your point, Herc, I agree 100%. Look, I get bringing guys in, particularly if they're available, to have a look at, to see what their personalities are, to see if they might mesh at a later date. But that's the problem I have. Calling this a U.S. men's national team camp, it's a B team, it's a C team, it's an under 23 with a handful of players. It's not the national team, and I think that's the tricky part when you call it something that it isn't.
Herc, who do you want to see?
I wanted to see Brian Gutierrez, the Chicago Fire. This kid was just made a young DP out there in Chicago. I thought he was doing very good things. I was eager to see him. He's not on this roster. That could mean a bunch of different things. Injury that's not disclosed, a future transfer, et cetera, whatever the case may be. Chicago didn't release him again, if that's the case. But I'm going to go with Diego Luna, and he's kind of the same mold. Now, I'm going to agree with what Kasey's saying. The reason I think it's interesting for a player like Diego Luna is because for Diego Luna, he didn't care what we think. Diego Luna doesn't care what they call it. This is an opportunity to catch the U.S. men's national team manager's eye. Now, Diego Luna is an interesting case. This is a do well at the USL level with the El Paso Locomotive, earn a Major League Soccer contract. Go to Major League Soccer with Real Salt Lake, where he was struggling for playing time, where he really wasn't getting on the field, goes to a U20 tournament, and after that, in the World Cup, everything changes, and he becomes a pivotal cog for RSL, earns his spot, and the most important thing here, Seb, in case is he's of a position, of a mold, of a certain body type and playing style that we're not seeing anymore. This traditional number 10, this old school 10, if you will. And today, those 10s turn into dynamic wingers, playmaking wingers on the outside. They're not the traditional in the center of the field, pull the strings. He's of that mold. So I'm interested to see how he does at the next level. But like Kay said, that's pretty much about it. We're trying to bet on the future here, and this really is looking with an eye on the future, eye on the Olympic squad.
Yeah, definitely the Olympics, right? Definitely the Olympics. You got all these guys that are Olympic age eligible. It'll be the U.S. against Slovenia, January 20th in San Antonio.